With spring officially over and as we move towards the dog days of summer, our plants are entering one of the most challenging periods of the growing season, especially if, like me, you garden in a climate where the summers are scorchers. I garden in Central Texas, Zone 8B, but have gardened in areas that make Texas's summer seem kind of mild, relatively speaking. But in neither hotspot have I had any major plant losses during the summer scorching temperatures. So today, I will be sharing tips and strategies to keep plants not just surviving, but hopefully thriving to the best of their ability during the dog days of summer. Hi everyone, my name is Lynn. Welcome back to Gardening from Square One. And if you are new here, welcome. First up is weeding, and I must admit, out of everything I do in the garden, this is my least favorite task. The critters in these beds, I had a weed that caused a reaction that made my flesh burn. But I know how weeds can get out of control if not addressed. So in the gardening beds I go. Fortunately, I'm not afraid of bees because when I was a kid, our family home had hawthorn plants near the front porch. And when this plant was in bloom, I would sit with bees less than a foot away from me and sit and play jacks. So no fear there, and I welcome the bees and the agastache and other plants, of course. But the lizards can be startling because, as I showed in my Mott of Trees transformation video, snakes slither through my yard, and until I see the lizard, I don't know what I'm hearing. And some of the spiders, though harmless, they don't look that way. And the ants can be darn right vicious. But you all know this is part of gardening and we love it. But back to the weeds. This is a time where the plants really need the water you provide and nutrients from the soil. So competition from weeds is not useful at any time, and especially now. So we should put in the time pulling the weeds if possible, of course. Speaking of water, if you run an irrigation system, turn on each zone and or spot or thoroughly check emitters or areas to make sure that the plants are being watered, because absent rainfall, this is the most important thing that plants will need when the temperatures begin to soar. In my garden, with the exception of perimeter evergreens that were added 3 years ago, every plant in my garden was added from this spring to 2 years ago. So for newer gardens, those under 3 years, like mine, diligence in this area is of the utmost importance. Last year, we were remiss in doing this and had a bunch of plants in the long bed that suffered. But fortunately, I only lost 2 to 3 Veronica. Now, Veronica, I find if it's growing in full sun, when it gets really hot, it will succumb to the heat if not getting properly watered. I think that my plants made it through the irrigation failure due to being mulched, which leads me to tip number 3. Check areas to ensure that plants that need mulch are properly mulched, and if not, replace it. Mulch helps in the regulation of soil temperatures by creating an insulation layer, which is important not just when it is cold, but also when the temperatures soar. Whether or not to deadhead roses can be controversial, but I deadhead mine. You can't tell right now as I've been away from my garden for about 10 days, but this weekend I will get after it. Typically, you do not want to do anything to stimulate growth. However, whether I deadhead or not, my roses will continue to grow throughout the dog days of summer. But deadheading actually makes the plant appear more tidy, which can be preferred no matter the time of year. Feeding roses, however, gives them a growth boost, and we generally want to refrain from doing that right now. That is in hot summer climates, of course. Next, some people put shade cloths or umbrellas on top of their plants during the blistering heat. This is not that kind of garden. I don't have the bandwidth to baby plants, but some people do, and I understand it could be very helpful. So no moving plants right now unless it's an emergency. And if you have to, provide regular water until you see that plant actively growing, and then more than likely it can be watered on the schedule you do for other plants that are similar. Just be sure to dig out as much of the root ball, keeping as much intact as you can, And with larger plants, this can require a bit of diligence. For smaller plants, it can be prudent to just put it in a pot in an area that only receives filtered sunlight. Then as it establishes, you may want to move it to an area that receives morning sun only, and then plant it as you get close to or during the fall. But this is for full sun and part sun plants only. A shade plant in the heat is going to want to remain in the shade if you put it in a pot. So if I'm going out of town and plants cannot be watered, plants in pots, they're going to go in the ground, because insulated by the soil and getting rainfall or whatever irrigation, it's going to be better than sitting on my porch or patio in the heat. Well, there you have it. A few tips to help you get your garden ready for the heat of summer. Stay cool. Please consider clicking like, subscribe, and notifications. Thanks for watching. Bye.